All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is Science Distilled St. Louis. My name's James. I'm a PhD student at WashU, and I'm co-hosting with Eva Kohlberg, who is a PhD student at UMSL. We'll give a few more detailed introductions in a little bit, but I just want to say thank you for joining us, and especially on this time when we're all cooped up in our homes because of the ongoing pandemic. We're hoping that we can still share a little bit of science with you all. Our theme for today is bats. Oh, hold up. So you may be wondering, if you're joining us for the first time, what is Science Distilled? And Science Distilled is this opportunity for scientists of all levels, whether they're graduate students, postdocs, or full-on tenured researchers at universities, to give talks with the public so the public knows what's going on, what's in all that research and development, and what's going on behind the scenes. A lot of the papers that many scientists publish might be a little bit difficult to understand. We're hoping to make that really approachable to the general public so that they know what's going on in the cutting edge world, and to look and ask questions a little bit more deeply about the world around us. We're also working in partnership with Urban Chestnut, so we like beer a lot.
Yeah. So when we're in person, our events are held at this brewery in St. Louis, Urban Chestnut. They are still selling merchandise. I will put the link to their online store and their out-of-work employees fund in the chat, just so you can access that and support them if you have the means. These are hard times for all of us, and businesses, especially small businesses. But we also love having our events there because everyone's in person, everyone can be relaxed, drink beer, listen to science, and just have a good time. So that being said, hopefully you all still have a good time, even though things are a little different this time around. So just keep in mind that this is new for us. This is our first time online. There might be bumps along the road, bear with it. But again, we'll just keep the spirit up and enjoy ourselves regardless. So thank you again to Urban Chestnut for hosting us whenever we have been in person. And again, even if you're remotely, you can still donate to their GoFundMe for out-of-work employees, just to ensure that these things can continue to happen in person sometime in the future when we're all in a place where we can interact in person again. That being said, also please continue to follow us for updates. We'll continue to do these in whatever form we need to for as long as we can. And you can follow us at any of these social media outlets, as well as email us, get on our listserv, be in the know about when these things happen again. That being said, James already introduced himself a little bit. I am Eva Kohlberg. I'm a PhD student at University of Missouri St. Louis, and I study ants and plants and how fire affects those two types of organisms.
And I'm James. I study ethnobotany, which is just people's relationship with plants. The specific aspect of that is how we use plants to make paper. We also want to thank our partner, the Academy of Science St. Louis, for helping put these science communication workshops together. And stay tuned. Our next edition will be provided by Astronomy on Tap, May 11th. So make sure you check our social media for details on that. And without further ado, let's introduce our speakers. Up first will be Jenny Mullikin, who is a PhD student at St. Louis University. And she'll be sharing a talk titled "Show Me Bats, A Day in the Life of Missouri's Bats." So please give us a moment as we switch screens.
Fun fact about Jenny. Jenny has baked 9 loaves of bread during this quarantine period already. So in a moment, we'll see her screen and she'll take it away from there.
Cool. I have too many windows open, so there we go. PowerPoint was not readily available. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm super excited to talk to you about Missouri bats. It's not something I study. Like James and Ava said, I am a PhD student at St. Louis University, and there I study more plant pollinator interactions. But before I went to grad school, I studied, or I worked as a scientist doing bat surveys throughout Missouri and the Midwest. So this is a little more primer on what you're going to be seeing throughout the springtime as bats come out of their hibernacula, and you could even be seeing some tonight. It's a little cold tonight, but so we're going to talk about bat biology, Missouri bats, kind of their yearly life cycle, threats to bats, and what you can do to help bats in the area. So some fun bat facts. So if you take nothing else from this, you can at least have some fast bat facts at your hands. Missouri has 14 species of bats, and they're all insectivorous. So that means that they all eat insects for their as their diet. The biggest bat we can find in Missouri is the hoary bat. It's also my favorite bat. It's the one in the top left photo. And the smallest Missouri bat is the eastern small-footed, but we don't get that one as much. And people always ask, how do we catch them or how do we find them? We catch them in nets or harp traps, or we collect their calls on acoustic recordings. And bats are really important for pest reduction and pollination, besides the fact that they're super cute puppies with wings. So just so we're all on the same page, bats are mammals. There are over 1,300 species of bats worldwide, and about a quarter of all mammals are bats. So that pie chart I have on the screen there kind of shows the distribution of different orders of mammals, different types of mammals, and you see rodents make up most of it with about 40%, and bats are the second largest group with about 25%. And bats are the only mammal capable of sustained flight. Flying squirrels just basically glide. They also get caught in our nets, by the way. So bats are in the order Chiroptera, which means hand wing. And so you can see from the photo and from the diagram that it really is a hand, basically all the hand bones that we have stretched over and kind of arranged slightly differently with a membrane stretched over the bones to get that wing. So it really is like a hand wing that we see, which means that bat wings are just skin stretched over elongated finger bones, and they're flying through the air with the power of jazz hands. So what's not to love about bats if they're flying with jazz hands? If you don't get that joke, I'm sorry, it would be better in person, but we're moving on. So in Chiroptera, that bat order, there's 2 suborders. So there's megabats. These are more of the fruit bats and things with that top right corner picture. And that's what Justin will be talking about next. So I'm just talking about the microbats because those are the type of bats that we have in Missouri with those bottom two pictures. And what distinguishes these bats, and there's many other things, but just 2 quick, easily distinguishable things, is that they echolocate and they have generally larger ears, so it helps with their echolocation. And echolocation is the mechanism where bats, getting distracted by the chat. Bats echolocate in order to find their food. There we go. So in Missouri, like I mentioned, we have 14 species of bats. There are some threatened and endangered bat species and some that are petitioned for protection and listing. And I'm not going to get into the details of the Endangered Species Act, but there's a lot of information available on the threats to bats, which ones are listed, how that whole process goes of being put up for listing, and the years of surveys that goes into determining if they're a candidate species. But we basically have bats that tend to live in caves and ones that tend to live in trees, and then some rare bats that might only be found on more the southern end of the state. And so to go through a few common ones that you're going to be seeing in Missouri and flying throughout your backyards and in the cities or in suburbs where you might be living. This is the big brown bat. The bats in the Midwest have really creative names. It's just basically a color and a size. So we got big brown bat here. They're common in urban and forested areas. It weighs anywhere from 13 to 30 grams, which is about the weight of 3/4. So can you imagine that's our one of our bigger bat sizes. They sort of specialize on beetles and moths for their diet. If you notice those teeth in that photo there, that's really good for chomping down through the exoskeleton of beetles and being able to capture bigger moths or moths in general. And these are cave-dwelling bats in the winter, but in the summertime and sometimes in the winter, if they really like their homes, they will reside in your home or somebody's home or just any human-made structure. So these are the ones you're going to, if you have a problem or if you've known anybody that's had a problem with a bat in their house, it most likely, not always, but could be a big brown bat. We have the eastern red bat. These ones are some of my favorites. They're really common. Again, they're named after their color, so they're red, eastern red bat. They also enjoy eating moths mostly. If you see the teeth that they have, again, really good at chomping through larger insect bodies. They live in forested areas, and they do not hibernate in caves. These ones are in forests year-round, and instead of living in caves in the winter, they'll migrate further south to warmer areas and hibernate under the leaf litter. And in the top left photo, we can see a mom with 2 of her pups. Red bats can actually have twins, even sometimes triplets, and their babies take up 1/3 of their body weight. If you can imagine having a baby take up 1/3 of your body weight. And then the right top photo is how they sleep. During the middle of the day, you can see red bats hanging from trees. I've never been lucky enough to see one, but I know people who have, and I know that's one of these days. Okay, another bat that we have, not that common, but really important for Missouri. This is the Indiana bat. It is federally endangered, and it was listed in the Endangered Species Act in 1967.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, so their declines have been because of disturbance to hibernacula, which are their winter caves. But now recently they have been affected by white nose syndrome, which is a fungus that's kind of taken over a lot of the bats that do hibernate in caves throughout the eastern United States, and I'll get into a little bit more of that later. But in the summertime, they have their summer roosts in trees. So some of the pictures on the bottom of the slide show the types of trees that they like to live in. So things that have popped out bark, standing dead trees that still have some exfoliating bark and crevices for them to kind of get up under and roost in there. the females form these maternity colonies where it's multiple females with all of their babies kind of co-parenting, and the males are bachelors and tend to sleep by themselves in trees. And yeah, those are the Indiana bats. There's one of the largest colonies of Indiana bats is actually in Hannibal, Missouri, just a few hours north of St. Louis. So Missouri's lucky that white nose hasn't taken over as many caves as other states. So we're one of the last stronghold states for Indiana bats. If it will advance, maybe. There we go. Okay, so I kind of started talking about their ecology, kind of a year in the life of a Midwestern bats. So in the spring and summer, basically right now, bats will be emerging from their winter hibernacula, whether that be a cave or migrating from more southern areas to get to their summer roosting sites. So in the spring, they're finding their summer spots, they're finding their roosts, the females will actually become pregnant and start to eat enough to feed their growing babies. And the reason a lot of the Midwestern bats move to trees, it's warmer. It's easy to find insects right out in the forests. And you can see, on the left photo, there's the bachelor males, again, tend to roost alone. So you can see kind of the size ratio of like one bat to a tree crevice that they need. So then in the fall and the winter, during the summer, they're eating a bunch of insects and they are having their babies and they're raising their pups in the forested areas. So then at the end of the summer, come fall, they're going to start thinking about hibernating again. So males and females will start to go back towards their winter hibernacula or their winter caves, or they'll migrate. So whichever mode of hibernation they have. And that's when mating will happen. So males and females will mate in the fall. They'll be flying around their winter hibernacula to bulk up and store fat. And then once they have mated and they have enough fat, they will go into hibernation and they can live off that fat for up to 6 months. So they really, really double in size at least. And others will migrate to warmer areas, and some, like the evening bats, will fly over 300 miles to get to their winter sites. And again, they need a lot of fat reserves for that really long, arduous trip. And then there's some bats that, like gray bats, that live in caves year-round and they sometimes will have summer caves and winter caves, but they do not go into trees and they only roost in caves all year round. So moving right along to threats to bats. So there's a lot of things, and some of these threats are common to a lot of animals, not just bats, including loss of habitat, purposeful killing. Bats don't have the greatest reputation, especially right now. So if people see them, they get kind of nervous, or people will go into caves thinking, oh, there's a cave nearby, I need to, protect myself, which is not necessarily the case. Polluting water resources is a big problem because their main diet around here are insects, and insects also need water. And a lot of bats eat aquatic insects. So polluting water resources means less food, and also they need water as well. They're mammals. Chemical applications to agricultural fields, again, pesticides reduce the number of insects in an area, so that decreases their food. And then white nose syndrome, which I'll go to the next slide, but then also renewable energy. So wind power is becoming a bigger problem to the hoary bat, which is our biggest bat in Missouri. There's still research going on as to why it's a problem, besides just because they don't tend to run into the blades. It's more of a wind issue. But that's a double-edged sword, right? Like, we want to have renewable energy, but it's not perfect, and that it really is impacting a lot of bat species. And then the last threat that I said I was going to mention is white nose syndrome, just because we all have viruses on our minds. This is something that is infected from humans to bats. So it's a fungus. It was introduced to the United States from Europe in about 2006 into New York, presumably brought by humans, and the spores were presumably on their clothes. They entered the cave and spread the spores of the fungus into the cave that way. So what happens is it infects skin membranes and soft tissues of the bats. And you can see in the photo, the noses, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse as I'm moving it around, but the noses on the bats are all kind of white and fuzzy. And so that's the fungus taking over. And so it can affect them in different ways. It can affect their soft tissues, so they can't fly, they don't necessarily wake up from hibernation, or else they might wake up from hibernation early, and they eat insects, and insects aren't necessarily flying in February or January, so they might wake up too early and not have any food and can't go back to sleep. So it's really devastating to the population, and about 7 million bats have been affected so far. But it's important to note that species ecology plays a big role in this, because it's really only affecting cave-dwelling bats. So things like the eastern red bat that I showed earlier is not affected because it really only stays in trees. But about 12 species are known to have the fungus, and the Indiana bat is of special concern because there's been about a 19% decrease in the Indiana bat population since 2007. But good news is that people are researching methods for a cure. So what you can do to help bats, because that's why we're here, that's why we love to talk about them, because they're cute. Just be aware of your impacts to wildlife. Leave dead standing trees if you can. Obviously, if they're a hazard, get rid of them. But like in the photo, that is a dead standing tree. That would be beautiful bat habitat. And it looks as if it's not in any high traffic area, that it might be a safety concern. You can also build your own bat house and put it up in your property. You can create your own habitat for wildlife just by planting native plants and insects that attract insects to your yard, because that is the kind of food that bats rely on. Tell people how cool bats are, because that reduces the stigma that these are scary, dirty animals. And also vote for people whose policies support wildlife and endangered species, support the Endangered Species Act. Because again, bats matter. They're really important to human health, because they get rid of our pesticide or our agricultural pests. They pollinate our crops, and we need them for important ecosystem functions, and because they're cute. And with that, I'll take any questions. So let me go to the chat. Cool. Okay, I'm on the chat.
Okay, yeah, just to pipe in. So if you have questions, we're encouraging you to ask them in the chat first, so everyone can see them, and so that we can go through them one by one. So thank you, Rachel. Go for it.
Cool. Yeah, Rachel asks, is there a way to treat white nose syndrome? So currently, there are people researching, like, I don't know the right word for it, if it's a fungal disease, so not an antibiotic, but basically a cure for it. There's some fungus properties that were found on banana skins, actually, that kept them from being moldy and like succumbing to some fungal infection of bananas. So people are researching if they can apply that to bats. Okay, so BH asks, what is the lifespan of big brown bats, eastern red bat and Indiana bat? In the wild, not that long, maybe like 5 to 10 years, but in captivity, I think they can live a lot longer. People don't keep bats as pets or in zoos or anything usually, or more, they don't keep the Midwestern ones. But there's a lot of rescues that people will send like injured bats, and so then if they can't be re-released to the wild, they'll keep them there, and I think those live quite long. James asks, would a heavily populated suburban area be good for a bat house? It would be, as long as it is away from the house, where squirrels and other things can use the house as a way to climb up and get into the bat house. And as long as it's in a sunny spot, it's great. Yeah, getting zoom bumps. Alex asks, what insects do Missouri bats eat? They'll eat a lot. Mosquitoes are a great one. I didn't mention that earlier. Mosquitoes, beetles, moths, hoary bats, again, my favorite. They like aquatic insects, so they'll eat like hemipterans, flies, other things like that. So if it, I don't know any insects that they don't eat. I guess that's a better way to put it. Justin asks, do bat houses need landing pads, or they can just fly up and in? If so, how long should the bat be? They do like a little landing pad, not too big, because then that invites other animals to kind of crawl up in it. But I don't know, maybe like a 5-6 inch landing pad with like some mesh screen material. The Bat Conservation International has really good guidelines on design and placement of your bat houses. But yes, they don't tend to just fly straight into the bat house, and they do kind of need a little landing pad. Leticia asks, do you know or think if the wind turbines could alter echolocation? That's a good question. I feel like it could, especially around here, and people don't really know why they are getting caught in the turbines. There's a lot more research that needs to happen. The idea is that what they think is they're not actually flying to the turbines. It's that by the time they're so small, and if they get close enough, by the time they realize that they are too close, it's really hard to like fly against that force. And also, they've done some studies with hoary bats, and they think they almost have little mini heart attacks because of the like pressure on that the wind puts on their bodies, and so it like kind of knocks the wind out of them, and they can't keep flying. So I don't know if anybody's researched the echolocation aspect, but I do think it would affect it. Sanjana, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, asks, since bats do not build nests, why or how would they choose the bat houses to reside? That's a great question. So they really just like cavities. So when they fly to trees in the summertime for their summer roost habitat, they're really looking for trees that have popped bark or crevices, things that they can kind of crawl up and under. So when they have bat houses, those bat houses mimic those crevices that they need in the trees, and that's why they're attracted to the bat houses. Audrey Joseph asks, we went to Carlsbad Caverns and the park rangers informed us that cell phones can affect their sonar. Do cell phone towers and heavy usage of electronics in cities impact bats in any way? That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. There's a lot in echolocation and acoustic monitoring that we don't know. If I had to guess, I'm sure there's some kind of unknown impacts that we still have to discover with that. So yeah. Alex asks, do bats prefer dead trees? They prefer trees with crevices. So I've seen them roost in both live and dead trees. It just depends. We did some surveys and it seems that more maternity colonies like the dead trees, because the dead trees tend to have more areas, like larger crevices, whereas the bachelor males tend to roost in more live trees like shagbark hickories. They have smaller cavities, but really any tree with a cavity will do. Jim asks, aren't bats a rabies danger? That's a great question. Bats don't transmit rabies to humans nearly as much as dogs do, or nearly as much as we think, just because of the limited contact between humans and bats. So if you see a bat, it's really not a danger to humans as long as you keep your distance and respect it as a wild animal. But I think I went over time, so I think I'm going to cut off the questions. Thank you so much for your questions.
Our next speaker is Justin, though, so we're going to let him start getting ready. And Justin chose to work with bats when he first chose his study organism because, in his words, they are more metal than birds. They are pretty metal. So Justin is a graduate student, Ph.D. student at Washington University in St. Louis. And we're going to let him take it away now. On to you, Justin.
All right. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Ava. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I currently don't study bats anymore, but I'm going to pick up where Jenny left and kind of go into, take a little trip to Latin America and look at some of the cool bats there, and I'll share a little bit of of the projects that I used to work on with bats. So we had 14 bats in Missouri, and across all of Latin America, we have 345 different species. And this is a big number, but these are pretty unevenly distributed. So, you know, kind of in northern Mexico and southern Chile, and on this map, you can see that there aren't a huge number of different kinds of species, but in the Amazonian basin and the Andean foothills of Peru and northern South America, you can find up to 120 different species of bats in the same area. And that diversity is really concentrated in one family of bats, the Phyllostomidae, which are the New World leaf-nosed bats, which have 192 species. And so this diversity is really kind of what drew me into biology and tropical biology in the first place. Because this Phyllostomidae, these leaf-nosed bats, they're just so weird and cool. Like this is just some of the species that you can find. On the left, you got the common vampire bat with this little piggy nose, and then in the middle there's a fruit bat, and on the right there is a nectar-feeding bat with this elongated snout. And then other guys include the sword-nosed bat here on the left, another nectar bat on the right, and then on the bottom right is just the wrinkle-faced bat. And so you can kind of see they all have this weird appendage on the top of their nose, which is this like nose leaf, they call it. And it serves probably some echolocation function, but different species really have different types of nose leaves, right? It's very, very modified to kind of suit the ecology of each species. And then also you have, you know, the biggest bat of the Western Hemisphere, this Vampirum spectrum, the false vampire bat, which eats pretty much whatever it feels like. These guys are, there's some records of them eating sleeping birds. And they, I don't know, I've caught one once, and it smelled like a goat. It was pretty wild. Yeah, so they've really figured out, they're job creators, right? They figured out hundreds of different ways of making a living, and that diversity of diets is really reflected in their evolutionary success. So this is a family tree of different genera within the leaf-nosed bats, and the different colors show the different diets, right? So in blue we have the insect eaters, and in red we have the blood feeders, in purple the meat eaters, yellow the nectar eaters, and the last ones to show up on the scene are the fruit eaters in green. And that last group, they started diversifying about 20 million years ago, and they're especially diverse. We heard a little bit about the different ecosystem services that bats provide, like you know, pest control or pollination. Fruit-eating bats really provide the ecosystem service of seed dispersal, which is basically free gardening, right? Some of you may have seen Leighton Reed's talk at the UCDC Brewery as part of the Science Distilled speaker series about a year ago, where he talked about his research on tropical reforestation. And you know, yeah, kind of one of the points that he made there was that one of the cheapest ways to jumpstart a reforestation project, you know, if you recently acquired a grassland or what used to be cow pastures and want to turn that into secondary forest, one of the fastest ways can be just to put a bat house out in the middle, and then bats will start coming in, and as they fly in, they'll poop out little seed packets, each with a little bit of fertilizer, and they'll just accelerate this reforestation process. And so within the fruit-eating bats, you know, you have the you have different kinds, right? So yeah, I like to really think of these as gardeners of the night sky in a way. And so that kind of sets the stage for the research talk, part of my talk where I wanted to talk about kind of some of the projects I did during my undergrad and for a little bit afterwards, mostly with at a couple different institutions. But the talk, the kind of frame of the talk, I want to call it, yeah, too much sauce when spicy fruit defenses repel bat seed dispersers. And so this really begins with the kind of broader observation and the paradox of why is it that some fruits out there can be toxic, right? And obviously not all fruits are toxic, at least, you know, to us, but some of them do have some, you know, potentially toxic compounds in there, right? So, you know, like peach pits have levels have this precursor to cyanide in them, as do apricot pits, and cashew fruits and mangoes, you know, contain pretty high concentrations of compounds that are very closely related to the things that make poison ivy so stingy and poisonous, and a lot of people actually have allergic reactions to that. But then also stuff like deadly nightshade, right? Super toxic, super poisonous, but at small dosages. In the Middle Ages, Italian noble women used to use very small dosages to temporarily enlarge their pupils to make them look more beautiful. But so it's really, you know, toxins are, and the idea of what poison is really all about the dosage, right? That's kind of what Paracelsus, the Swiss doctor, threw down in 1500s, saying that, you know, poison is really just all about the dose. So, but again, you know, why do some fruits have these poisons in them? Well, you know, the short answer can just be chemical warfare. Plants are constantly at war. They're always fighting off insects that are trying to attack them, you know, either eating their plants, their roots, their shoots, the meristems, or the fruits as well. And so the way in which they defend themselves is by either pumping their structures full of poisons or ramping up toxin or defense chemical production in areas when they get attacked, or like when molds or fungus attacks their fruits, then they will put out these defense compounds to slow the growth of the molds. But that's really only part of the story, because well, first let's say that these compounds are, while they come from this defensive function, or they serve defensive purposes for plants, and when we enjoy them culturally and kind of for our own cooking, it's basically the plant is trying to kill us in this moment. So yeah, that's just something worth bearing in mind. But this defensive angle is really only part of the problem, or part of the landscape of different functions that these defensive compounds have, because plants also they depend on their allies, right? They need to get around. If you're a plant, you can't move. The only way in which you can move is if you send your pollen outwards, or if you move your seeds around. And the best way, or one way in which a lot of plants do move, is by recruiting animals to do that movement for them. So in that way, it's really an exchange. It's a barter, where plants, they make their seeds, encase them in delicious, nutritious fruit pulp, and they offer that to animals as a resource. And when frugivores like ants, birds or bats eat these fruits and then disperse them away, they're really fulfilling their part of the bargain. And so there really isn't a lot of research done on the potential for defensive fruit compounds to also influence the plant allies, like seed dispersers. So that's kind of the research, the knowledge gap that we wanted where we started. And this work was all done with Susan Whitehead, who is now a professor at Virginia Tech. And her system she really built up the system of working with bats, fruit-eating bats in the genus Carolia, and neotropical pepper plants in the genus Piper. So this is the kind of interaction that you can see. For these Piper plants, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this whole green stalk that the bat is about to fly into, it's kind of like a corn on the cob. That's the whole fruit. And there are it's like an infructescence, and there are thousands of tiny little fruit kernels, each with a seed in there. So we did this work, or at least the field work part of it, in Costa Rica on the Atlantic side, at the La Ceiba Biological Station that's run by the Organization for Tropical Studies. And this is a really amazing field station in a lot of ways, but mostly because there is, they just have state-of-the-art lab equipment right in the middle of this amazing plot of forest. And so one of the main pepper plant species that we worked with was this Piper sanctifelicis. And so when you step out of the lab there, you're in the middle of this dense forest with a really thick understory. Lots of Piper plants. Pepper plants actually make up the understory, and when you're in the understory, it's pretty dark. There are a lot of tall canopy trees that block out a lot of the sun. And then when you go out at night, you set up your nets and you start catching bats. And part of the joy of being out at night and doing bat work, for me at least, is just all the other random wildlife that you encounter, right? So these are a couple just other pictures from other bat collecting trips that I've done later. But you get these awesome things like these waxy jungle frogs, or some other interesting bycatch like this cinnamon screech owl that we had later on. And we also get these nighthawks. This guy's a common paurake, which is a close cousin of the eastern whippoorwill, which is a species of bird that just showed up. It's a migrant, just showed up back in Missouri. They breed here as well. But the bats we were working with were these Carolia perspicillata, which are kind of these short-tailed fruit bats. And they're pretty small. They're also really abundant. And that's kind of what makes them such a great group to work with, because it's really easy for them, or for researchers to kind of A, find them, and then B, bring them into captivity, because they're really amenable. And so when you kind of bring them into captivity and put them in big flight cages, you can just put a fresh pepper plant up there, and they will go up. They'll hang out for a little bit, but they'll figure it out. They go and eat their food right in front of you, as if they don't care that you're there. And then when they grab, the way they eat is really cute, because they'll fly up, bite into the fruit just like this, and then grab it with their back legs and transport it off just a short distance to like a small feeding roost, where then they'll eat the entire fruit just like a corn on the cob. So they'll spin it between their thumbs and just like move it back and forth in front of their mouth. And then when they're done, they just like us, they take the cob out and throw it on the ground. And then when they're done with that, then they clean themselves, and you can get right up there, and they don't care. So yeah, it's a really great study system to work with. So we were interested, in these potential costs to seed dispersal, and so we did a couple feeding experiments. The first one was this one, where we've gone out at night, right? We've brought a couple bats into captivity. Each one is in its own little cage, where it's like they have no space to fly around in. And then we start this experiment where we go out in the morning, find a couple ripe fruits of these pepper plants, bring them back into the lab, spike them with higher concentrations of these defensive chemicals that the pepper plants use, and then we feed them back to the bats, but we do it one at a time. And it's a little bit of like a Russian roulette type experiment, right? But with spiciness, because we randomized the orders. So for every experiment, the bat may get a normal fruit, which has nothing added, or it may get one to which we've added higher levels of some of the commercially available types of defensive compounds that pepper plants use. Or we even made some artificial pepper plants or pepper fruits that have up to 3 times the amount of normal levels of defensive compounds. And then we measured how long it took for them to, from when they finish eating till their first big poop of the night. And so with that, we could really see that these defensive chemicals are giving the bats diarrhea. So basically that's reducing their gut retention time. And not all chemicals that we tried have this effect, but some of them really seem to reduce the gut retention time. And also this experiment, the variation that we did where we increase the concentration of existing compounds. The higher concentrated, the more spicy the fruit gets, basically, the faster it goes through. So that's kind of one thing that we found. A second type of experiment that we did is really similar, where we go out, we have the same kind of setup, bats in their individual cages, and we go out in the morning, collect the fruits, we make a couple artificially spicy fruits, but then we feed them to them in a buffet style. So instead of getting only one fruit, like in the previous experiment, now they can choose between 5 different fruits. And they have, all these 5 fruits have different levels of compounds here. And then what we could do is measure the time that they take before eating a fruit. And what we see is that fruits that are normal and don't have increased amounts of secondary defensive compounds, they get eaten earlier on in the night. So they have a lower time to fruit removal than the ones to which we've supplemented and added these defensive compounds. Those are kind of like two results where we really see how the plant is changing the disperser's behavior. And it's doing so by changing 2 aspects of the timing of seed dispersal, right? One is by changing the gut retention time and giving them diarrhea, and the other one is just by causing them to eat the fruits later on in the night. And so that's, it's interesting, but what does that really mean for the plant, right? What does that really mean for seed dispersal distance? So it turns out that a lady in Germany had actually done her PhD thesis on one of these bats, and she did this in the early 90s, and so got a hold of her, and she had all of her raw data available on floppy disks. And so we started talking, and she was able to resuscitate and resurrect all of these old data that basically give us a really high resolution picture of what individual bats do through the night. You know, so our phones track us, right? Facebook and Google know a lot about how we spend our time and where we go, when we go where. And this is basically what this lady collected for individual bats of these Carolia bats. And so from these data, we were able to see exactly what these bats are doing when they forage and immediately after they forage. Like, how far do they travel after feeding? And so then we were able to construct this kind of like a baseline picture of how far plants would move when they get eaten by these bats. And so we see overall that there are two things that are important that determine how far a plant's seeds get to travel. So this plot shows pretty much like a contour plot, a surface plot, right? The dark blue colors that are up here on this ridge on the bottom right-hand corner of the plot, those are the seeds that are moving the farthest. They're moving up to 250 meters on average. And those are the seeds that have really high gut retention times, right? So they stay in the bat for a long time. And those are the seeds that get eaten early on in the night. So basically bats kind of have one big activity peak early on in the night, and then they hang out for a while. They don't move that much for the rest of the night. And so, yeah, so this is kind of the normal picture, how a normal fruit would move through space. And the averages here are shown with these black points. But when you add the effects that we were able to see in our captive experiments, we see that the fruit secondary compounds, now the red points and red distributions, move from the bottom of this arrow to the top of the arrow. So they move away from this area of high dispersal distances, and they move towards, like, kind of downslope towards this area of lower dispersal distances. So by doing that, we're able to show that these fruit defenses can really reduce the seed dispersal distance, which is super important for a plant, right? It's the only way that plants can move. And so maybe to kind of wrap up and say that, answer the question at the beginning, or answer the title at the beginning, maybe it's not too much sauce. Maybe the plants are producing just the right amount of sauce, because defensive chemicals really mediate this balanced, very nuanced interaction between their enemies and their allies at the same time. So with that, I want to say thanks to all the labs and funding sources that were involved, and to you guys for your patience. And with that, I'll take any questions. All right, let's see. Wow, Justin, rude. Okay. Uh-oh, a little private. Apple seeds contain cyanide. Alex is saying apple seeds contain cyanide. Yeah, a lot of seeds contain low levels of cyanide or a precursor to cyanide. So a chemical that's really like cyanide and that we metabolize and transform into cyanides once we ingest it. So yeah, that's a really good point. Not only peach pits or apricot kernels, or I think some almonds also may contain, cherry stones can also contain low levels of these precursors to cyanides or cyanide relatives. Yeah, and that's awesome. Yeah, apple seeds can totally do it too. Okay. Do plants, and Mallory asks, do plants with defensive chemicals smell any different from plants without defensive chemicals? Can bats smell the difference? That's a great question. So it really depends on so I guess it's both a question and a good observation, right? Because we humans, we can't smell that well, right? We employ dogs to smell better for us, right? When and for bombs, for airport security, right? We employ dogs, right? Because they can smell a whole lot better. Bats can smell really well also. I don't know exactly on the order of magnitude of like how many functional receptors they have compared to dogs, but they can smell a whole lot better than we can. I personally wasn't able to smell the difference between the defensive spicy fruits that we made and the normal fruits, but I did taste it, and they taste pretty different. And I think what some of our data show that they the part where the bats are really eating the normal fruits before the spicy ones, I think that is probably mediated by smell. I bet they can smell the difference. Oh, and they're also super picky, right? Like if you have because fruits will ripen only when you go to a bush of these pepper plants. You can see a lot of fruits that look like they're just about to ripen, but each individual fruit only ripens right before sunset, and it does it kind of randomly. You never really know which one's gonna be right. And the bats are really picky, so they never eat the unripe ones. They only eat the ripe ones. So I bet that has to do with smell as well. Okay. Sanjana is asking, are the toxins activated by gut bacteria, and is that why gut retention is low with a high concentration of toxins? That's a great question, because the mechanism is, I think it's totally up in the air. My best guess is that given that the toxins, given that the gut retention time is so fast already, right? They have pretty short guts. I mean, they're pretty small animals also, but these seeds are passing through them with, on average, just the normal ones, they pass through in 20 minutes, right? So I would be surprised if it's bacteria that are mediating that cascade, because that, I feel like, for bacteria, like when we get food poisoning, right? We eat something that's like doesn't sit well with us, and then it takes a couple hours until all those bacteria really start growing, and just because bacterial metabolism takes a while, right? It takes a while for those bacteria to produce the toxins that then we react badly to. And so I think bats are just like, their metabolisms are so fast, they're really close to hummingbirds. They have to go out every night and eat a ton of fruit. Otherwise they croak. They're just like living so close to the metabolic edge where they really just gotta get as much as they can. All right, Emily's saying 392 species is a lot, but that's all of South America. Yeah. Same question as Mallory. Do they sense chemicals, or is it more like mice where a demonstrator eats and others smell? Ooh, that's also a great question too, active research. So I think it's kind of both. I think they have both the ability they have really a very refined olfactory, like a smell ability. I think that's really refined for them, but they're also really social. So when you there's some other people who work on the sociality of them and kind of all the interactions that happen in roosts, kind of between members of the same group or in these little tents that they make. And it seems that there's a lot of social, that I know of at least one paper that shows that really conclusively shows horizontal transmission of information about the food. So basically it's kind of like, it's almost like if you ever lived like in an apartment with roommates who maybe you don't speak the same language, but you can kind of figure out like, who's had a good night and who not. And so I think it's kind of like that, right? You can tell if someone comes back from like a great party, right? And they have, these bats are coming, they're flying out throughout the forest, they come back, they share the same roost. If you know, your friend in the same roost comes back and they're covered in delicious food and they just look like they had a great time, you're going to follow them the next time too, right? So I think there might be some social transmission going on, just like you say there.
Okay, and thank you so much, Justin. Let's have one last question. Adina is asking if there are any other factors that impact seed dispersal by bats. So maybe let's answer that and then turn it over to Juan.
Okay, other factors impact seed dispersal, anthropogenic. Yeah, so habitat destruction, loss of habitat is the single most largest threat to wildlife that we can stop, right? I think, you know, kind of deciding what land use we support through our consumer choices and through our political choices is probably one of the single most largest things that we do. Or if we have the luxury of owning land, you know, deciding what we want to do with it. I think those are really important, actionable things that we can take to protect bats and facilitate their consistent contribution of this valuable ecosystem service.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. Everyone give him your mental thank yous. Chime in our comments afterwards. But with that, we're going to turn the speaking and the screen sharing over to Juan Moreira-Hernandez. And Juan is in my department. He's amazing. He studies bats, and fun fact, he has almost as many bat shirts as there are days in the week, and so it takes him a really hard time to decide what to wear when he's presenting about bats. So check out his shirt when he presents, and with that, let's turn it over to Juan.
Hi everyone, I think you all should be able to see me well. Let me see. Okay, I'm just gonna show you my bat t-shirt. It says "Save the Bats." It's got a little flying fox bat with a big heart. And I'm gonna start sharing my screen just now. Okay. All right. Okay. Hopefully you guys should all be looking that introductory slide from Science Distilled. But I'm gonna start my presentation now. So the theme of this talk is going to be about like the relationship between bats and human diseases that we have heard about a lot over the past several months now because of the current pandemic. There is a large amount of information that we are receiving in the media, and much of it is highly technical and not easily digestible. So to really understand what's going on and how bats fit in the picture related to this virus and how it is affecting us worldwide, it's can be overwhelming. So I'm gonna try to do my best to try to explain this in ways that you all can understand. But first, I'm not an expert in infectious diseases or virology or epidemiology. I'm actually an ecologist, and I'm interested in the relationship with bats with plants, in particular pollination. But I also care a lot about bat conservation, and unfortunately, bats don't have the best public relationships team out there. So because of the current pandemic situation and all the talk about bats being involved somehow, I've taken a keen interest in this topic to learn as much as possible to try to do my part and try to combat misinformation. Very often, that's mostly me trying to point friends and family towards reputable, trustworthy sources of information based on actual evidence. But when we were planning this event some months ago, my original plan was about to talk about pollination, but then a few weeks ago, I decided, well, actually, I would like to talk a little bit about bats and human diseases, and because it's such a hot topic right now, and I think it's very important. So I'm going to do my best to try to stress what do we know about the relationship between bats and diseases that affect humans, but also I'm going to really stress too that there's still a lot of information that we need. There's still a lot of things that we don't know. So I'm going to try to highlight what we know but also really stress what we don't know for sure yet. Okay, so I have basically 3 goals for this presentation, which are answering the following questions. How do pathogens, virus especially, jump from wildlife to humans and cause disease? And in this case, wildlife is bats. And what's up with bats in particular, that they do seem to be linked with so many human diseases, especially some that are very infamous, such as Ebola, for example, or the SARS respiratory disease of COVID-19 that we're seeing affecting us now. And finally, I'm going to close with some considerations about how can we prevent these events when viruses jump from wildlife species such as bats to humans. How can we prevent this from happening at all, while also still protecting the bats and the valuable services that they provide to our societies? So I'm going to start with this headline that is very similar to, I'm sure, several that you have seen over the past several weeks and months, because since very early on in the outbreak of this pandemic, bats were suspected to be the origin of this SARS-CoV-19 coronavirus. So initially, that was one of the first leads that scientists were exploring to understand the origin of this virus. A little later, then more evidence came out suggesting that bats could be the main source, but then pangolins, especially mammalian species, could be an intermediate host. So the relationship became a little bit more complex, and we got to that. But the reason why bats were first suspected, and a second animal, in this case a pangolin, was also suspected to act as an intermediary in the spread of the virus from bats to humans, is because that was actually recently demonstrated in regard with the SARS pandemic in 2003. So the actual strains of the virus that cause disease in humans were found in a species of bat from Southeast Asia. It's a type of horseshoe nose bat, and because of the structure of its face. But in this case, the intermediary was a small carnivore, an Asian palm civet, which is related to mongoose, but not quite, but it's also a type of a small carnivore, one of the old world. So, so we got a natural host of the virus, and then an intermediate host that served like as an amplification before the virus was transmitted to humans, right? So that's an hypothesis that was established for SARS, and it was considered that for the case of COVID-19, it's probably a similar story. Well, let's first talk about some terminology to be all on the same page. So how do pathogens jump from wildlife to humans and cause disease? Well, first off, the diseases that jump from animals, either domestic or wild animals, to humans and cause disease are called zoonotic diseases. So they are characterized by having an animal origin and being able to be transmitted to humans, and then once in humans, cause some symptoms and some disease of varying levels of severity, right? But if it's transmitted to animal, then it's a zoonotic disease. The animal host is considered the natural host of the pathogen, either virus, bacteria, or whatever. But in the context of that transmission between wildlife and humans, or between domestic animals and humans, then the pathogen is often termed as the reservoir. So the actual event that leads to the transmission to humans is called a spillover. And either single spillover events or several spillover events within a short period of time are often what leads to disease outbreaks, when the number of cases start to increase, and then if that continues on, then it's going to be up to public health officials to consider whether that's going to be declared an epidemic first, and then if it spreads further, then a pandemic. So how does this transmission occur? So there's multiple mechanisms for which pathogenic agents can be transmitted between wild animals to domestic animals, between wild animals to humans, or between domestic animals and humans. And this scheme, this diagram shows some of the most common ones, either, for example, airborne transmission of viruses, for example, especially because they are so small, they can, sometimes they can persist in the air in a small respiratory droplets, or those particles, for example. In the case of vector-transmitted diseases, then the disease can jump from one species to the other, mediated by a tick or a mosquito, for example. The mere close proximity, if there's some contact with like animal fluids, like blood or urine or feces, that can lead to the transmission of a pathogen as well. The consumption or contaminated meat or milk or other products from an infected animal can also lead to transmission. And of course, inappropriate handling of animals by either by accident or deliberately grabbing a wild animal for whatever reason. If it ends in a bite, then that can also lead to a transmission. So we know that this new coronavirus first was detected in China, right? But spillover effects, although we hear that they occur often in Africa and Asia, they also occur in more developed countries too. So let's have a look at one special case that is like very well studied in Australia between bats that were the natural reservoirs of the Hendra virus that causes a severe neurological infection, horses, which were the intermediaries, and then through horses, it infected humans too. But this diagram shows how the spillover events result from a perfect storm of many different factors. So it's not always a very easy, straightforward story. So often you need a lot of things to fall into place for a spillover event to occur. So in this case, we have a highly modified environment in which fruiting trees that where the bats like to eat were depleted, and they ended up being few and scattered around the landscape, and many trees ended up in the middle of pastures where horses grazed, right? So bats were left with no option than to adapt. So they will visit these fruiting trees in the middle of a horse pasture, and then they will feed on the fruits, and then like their droppings or like pieces of food can fall to the ground. And if one bat is infected, then it's possible that some of the pathogen, in this case the Hendra virus, ended up on the grass underneath the tree. And if the horses were feeding on that grass, then that's how the spillover event occurred, from the reservoir species, the bat, to the intermediate species, the horse, and then horses in turn became sick, and by the production of a copious amount of nasal froth, they also got their caretakers infected as well. And so this kind of situation where you have like wild animals, domestic animals, and humans in a very close situation where they can interact is facilitated by our effects in the environment. In this case, the transformation of the landscape, the changes in the availability and quality of food, habitat for the bats, and the introduction of domestic animals, then that led to the conditions required for the Hendra virus that originally occurred in bats to jump to horses and then to humans. Okay, so bats are often suspected or have been in some cases associated, confirmed to be the reservoirs of some viruses that cause severe disease. Notoriously, for example, we have deadly hemorrhagic fevers such as Ebola or Marburg. In this case, the green check indicates that the relationship of bats as reservoirs have been firmly established before any beyond any reasonable doubt. But also we have the cases of the coronavirus. This coronavirus causes diseases that are of respiratory illnesses, such as SARS and MERS, where wild bats are the reservoirs of the virus that causes the disease in humans, and those have been well studied. But in COVID-19, I didn't put the check because the jury's still out, and we'll get to why. And then we have some other neurological infections, such as Nipah virus disease or Hendra virus disease, or rabies virus from bats, which is different than the rabies virus that can infect humans through dogs. By far, the most cases of rabies in the world are caused by bites from dogs or animal carnivores. But as humans encroach in natural habitats and they interact increasingly with more with bats, then in some areas you can start seeing a slight increase in the number of rabies cases associated with bats. But this is still much lower numbers than the ones caused by dogs or other carnivores. So this association is between bats and the pathogens they carry and how they get to humans is not always a very straightforward tell. But what is generally considered a true fact is that bats tend to carry or tend to have a lot of viruses. But as this interest in understanding why exactly makes the bats reservoirs of viruses, this area of research only has developed really in the last 15 to 10 years. So how can they tolerate living with so many viruses? Well, we have various clues, but still are far from a complete picture. Okay, so one of the main reasons why bats might be very good at tolerating viral infection, it is because their flying lifestyle demands high amounts of energy. So they have to eat a lot, as Justin was mentioning. They need a very high caloric diet, so they have to eat a lot. Their metabolism and their mitochondria in their cells run on overdrive, so they generate a lot of heat and a lot of energy. But the way how the mitochondria work, by transforming food into energy, they release reactive oxygen molecules that can be very harmful for animal DNA, for cell DNA. So bats have, because they evolved the ability to fly, they also needed to adapt to deal with this high production of oxidative molecules in their cells that can damage their DNA. But the way how they came up with how to solve this problem incidentally made them also very good at tolerating viral infections. And basically, this scheme summarizes exactly what's going on. So, because viruses hijack the genetic machinery of the cells to reprogram them and turn them into virus factories, the same genetic tools that bats have to detect and repair damaged DNA also happen to be great at detecting these viral attempts of reprogramming the cells. So they have a higher constant expression of this molecule called interferon, which detects viral infection in the cells. And then, but we also have interferons, the humans, but in general, we only turn the production of interferon on after a long series of steps. In the case of bats, this is always on, because if it's not a virus, then it's going to be the DNA that is being damaged by the high production of energy in the mitochondria and the high production of reactive oxygen species. And then the interferon molecules that the bat cells are constantly produce also stimulate, upregulate the gene expression of a special enzyme called the ribonuclease L, which is very good at snipping and chopping off fragments of viral DNA as well. So that's a very efficient antiviral defense that the bats always have. But often, the activities of these defenses trigger our immune system response, because when we have viral infections or damaged DNA and our cells are responding with these mechanisms, often that is detected by our immune system, which sends the white blood cells to attack the cells that are being damaged, whose DNA is being damaged. So bats need to control this excessive autoimmune response called inflammation. So they also have dampened the activity of some of these cells mediating, or some of the sensors that are mediating the inflammatory response, and especially the cytokinins involved in the inflammatory response, because chronic persistent inflammation resulting from a high viral infection in humans, for example, or in other animals, it's the cause of some of the symptoms that make us feel and look visibly sick. High fever, for example, or some of the stronger symptoms that we see in COVID-19, for example, the failure of the respiratory arrest, for example, is associated because of extensive tissue damage that occurs in our lungs because of the immune system goes higher and tries to fight off the virus. So bats attack the viral infection through this two-edged approach, by having constant antiviral defenses on always, but also by controlling the worst effects of the autoimmune response. So that makes them able to tolerate viral infection and snip it in the bud really quick before it becomes a problem, while at the same time managing to not look visibly symptoms, not develop symptoms that will make them seriously sick. So in this case, bats have been able to do that because the evolution of them dealing with viruses goes for like several million years, right? So they have had time to adapt, them and the viruses as well, because the viruses will then adapt to the strong defenses that bats have. And so each of them sort of like knows the rules of engagement, so to speak, right? But also we have bats that are such a diverse and successful group of animals worldwide. So we have lots of different species exploring several different niches, as Jenny and Justin mentioned, worldwide. And they also occur often at high densities in their roosts, in their colonies, or in their caves. So even if each individual bat is able to receive viral infection and arrest it quickly enough so that it doesn't become a problem for that bat, maybe that virus will get lucky and will be able to be transmitted to a different bat. So the viruses can then linger in the population relatively easy. So if you are a virus or if you're a pathogen and you were able to crack this amazing group of hosts, then you can free ride in their ecological success and become also a very successful group of pathogens as well. But again, this occurs because both you and your host have developed this relationship over many millions of years. So if bats are so good at hosting viruses, then are they the culprits behind these diseases that we are seeing in the recent decades? The answer is no. Actually, healthy bats in healthy environments are probably the safest places where many of these viruses can be. And that is because when the viruses are in the body of the bat's immune defenses are constantly and aggressively attacking the virus ability to replicate. So you can think of bats as like having this superpower of being like a virus containment unit that is like biosafety level 4, like it's like the safest place for these viruses to be. Viruses in turn have co-evolved with the bats, and they have their own set of ways to try to like circumvent the bat's defenses, or like remain dormant and wait until the bat is weakened to get them sick. But most of the time, bats might have the virus, they will show symptoms, and the virus will just like have a low infectivity. But the issue is that we can't all be as amazing as a bat. So when bat viruses spill over to other animals that doesn't have such an arsenal of antiviral defenses, then these viruses might be able to overrun the new host and cause severe disease. But also, it doesn't, just because bats have viruses doesn't mean that the same virus that is present in bats is the one that once in a human will cause disease. is more complicated than that. So let's talk about bats and SARS-CoV-2, the virus causing the COVID-19 pandemic. So this virus, as probably many of you might have seen the pictures of this virus in the media, has this little crown, which is why the name coronavirus comes from. Corona means crown. Has a little crown of proteins on its outer surface called the spike proteins, and these spike proteins mediate the infection of the cells of the host. So when researchers first got their hands in the genome of this virus, they immediately tried to look at the similarity of the genome with the genomes of other viruses that they already knew. And here is a graph that shows the genetic similarity. So in terms of like how similar each of these viruses here listed in the middle here, how similar are they compared to the SARS-CoV-2 virus causing the current pandemic? So if any of these was exactly the same virus affecting humans, then you'll see a flat line here corresponding to 100% similarity. But you don't see that. You see that most of the viruses are like 50, 60, 70. This one is kind of like 90. The closest one is this blue one here, the bat coronavirus called RITG13, which is here in blue. But even this one doesn't match perfectly, which means that this strain of the virus, this type of coronavirus, is not the one that is currently affecting humans. That doesn't mean also that it could not potentially affect humans. But let's zoom in this particular location here, where the drop in similarity is bigger. It actually corresponds to the sequence of the spike protein. So if we zoom in that small area of the protein sequence, and we compare that sequence with that of other known coronavirus, we see that in this case, the one that has the largest similarity is this one here, the red line that corresponds to a coronavirus isolated from pangolins from Malaysia. But in this case, the highest similarity, the similarity is especially striking here in this orange band, because the other coronavirus have a huge drop in how similar the sequence is. So this means that these are very different. And this red line is the closest one, but it's still kind of like not a perfect match. But why is this orange region particularly important? Is because this is the key region in the spike protein that interact with the protein in the cell membranes of the host. So this region here is called the binding motif. Is the most accurate part of the protein that has to interact with the cells of the host to produce the infection. So what does this all mean? Well, it means that the virus that is causing the current pandemic is neither a bat coronavirus, neither a pangolin coronavirus. It seems to be some sort of like chimera of both. Largely, it resembles the bat coronavirus, but the key sequence that mediates the infection with human cells is that sequence is closer to the coronavirus in pangolins. So this leaves us with two possibilities. Either the virus was from bats and then jumped to pangolins, and then from pangolins acquired this sequence here to become able to infect human cells successfully, or alternatively, there might be some other animal that we are not aware of that is carrying the actual coronavirus that is infecting humans. So it's either bats and pangolins, or it's either some other species that we don't know. So in this case, the jury is still out. We cannot conclusively prove anything yet. We are still mid-pandemic, and it's difficult to get a lot of information. But surely, there's lots of people currently researching this. And over the next several months and years, we're going to see more evidence, and we'll probably be able to reconstruct the full picture, hopefully. But what we can say for certain is that our activities increase spillover risk, right? The trafficking and consumption of wildlife animals in markets or in places where we have like lots of different species in close proximity with each other in unsanitary conditions create a perfect storm for an spillover to occur, virus to recombinate and acquire new genetic tools from other closely related viruses from other animals that they are not able to interact in the wild, but they might interact in the context of a wildlife market. And of course, our destruction of habitats for wildlife can also increase how much these wildlife species or bats are forced to then like interact with us more closely, and then increases the chances that a virus might jump a species. So in the case of the bats that have like this delicate balance of antiviral defenses and suppressed immune response that allows them to persist to hold viruses and don't get sick themselves, when we add the stresses, such as arising them from hibernation because of disturbing their caves, or because they just got a new infection from a second disease that they don't have the defenses of, for example, white nose syndrome, or the destruction of habitat, the destruction of food resources, and that they turn them into weaker animals that are not able to maintain an immune response as effective. That can decrease the antibody levels, or just like lowering their defenses overall, which they can then help the virus to replicate itself in the body of the bat more easily, and a higher viral load will increase the chances that a bunch of those viral particles might spill over from bats into the environment and potentially into domestic animals, other wild animals, and humans, of course. Okay, so how can we prevent these events from happening? So typically, let's consider this diagram. So we have a population of wild animal as host of a pathogen, right? And the pathogen fluctuates cyclically, naturally in the host. But because of the humans and our domestic animals increasingly more in contact with this wildlife species, then the spillover event might occur just as a result of an increased frequency of interactions between animals, domestic and wild, and also humans, right? So spillover might occur. If it occurs, then it might be that the pathogen is amplified in domestic animals and then can spill over to humans, or then it can become amplified in a human host, and then from that human be transferred to other humans, and then we end up with an outbreak. So to prevent this, we can take actually several different measurements. But key is early detection and constant surveillance, because the sooner we catch it, the less number of actions we need to take, and the less drastic they're going to need to be to stop the outbreak. So of course, like constant surveillance will help us be able to predict and be ready, right, for when and where the outbreaks can occur, and as soon as they occur, detect them early, put control operations measures in place, respond rapidly, and then drastically decrease the number of cases that we will have otherwise, right? Because like now with this pandemic is very evident what can happen if we are caught unawares. So it's extremely important that we follow the advices of scientists and infectious disease researchers and public health experts, and that invest more in scientific research to be able to better prepare, right, for the next pandemic, because there will be another one. It's just a matter of time. The sooner we're prepared, the sooner we catch it, the better off we're going to be. So to prevent the next pandemic, then we need to change our activities that increase the spillover risks, right? So less deforestation and activities such as wildlife trafficking need to stop, really. We need to vote for public officers that will follow the advice from scientists and public health experts, and that will strengthen our healthcare systems and fund research. And we need to realize and educate others about the value of healthy wild bats and other wildlife in healthy environments, because that's actually our safest safeguard against spillover risk. So we need to protect them, and we need to educate others about their benefits and importance. And so as final takeaways, I think I'm already over time. Bats have developed a long and intricate relationship with many viruses over many millions of years. But if we leave them alone, both bats and their pathogens, their both will be just fine. But when this relationship is disrupted by our activities, then it poses significant risk for human health and for society. By protecting bats and their wildlife in their habitats, we are also protecting ourselves, so we can continue enjoying the beneficial services that they provide for us. And we need to be reminded that human health, wildlife health, and ecosystem health are all interconnected. You can't have one or two and not the third one. So you need to have all of them. Okay, thanks for your attention. I'm happy to take some questions if there's some time, or yeah, you're welcome to write me an email or something like that, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Juan. If anyone needs to peace out, you can. We won't be offended, but we're going to stick around and let Juan answer some questions. So I already see there's some in the chat. So let's let you have at them.
Okay. Let's see how far back I need to go. Okay. Okay, so Philip Newell asks if insects carry these coronaviruses. We have no evidence of that. Coronaviruses, at least the ones that we have found and that we have studied so far, are only in humans, and they might be in birds too, but certainly not in invertebrates, to my knowledge. And I don't think that they can be transmitted to us by insect vectors also. Okay, so we have KJC0547. Are cancers common in bats? I ask because there's a lot of interest in how a human's immune system attacks cancer cells before clinical cancer is evident, somewhat mirroring how our immune system handles some viruses. If bats seem to have an immune system that is more tolerant and efficient at mitigating the effects of viruses, I wonder how this carries over to bats' immune defenses regarding malignancies. This is an amazing question, because when I was researching for this talk, I discovered that this constant cell damage that bats are susceptible to because of their high energy production in their mitochondrial created a selective pressures for bats' immune systems to be able to detect and repair quickly damaged DNA. So mutated DNA that might also result on a cancer, or also that can result from an infection by a virus. So this ability of bats to detect and repair damaged DNA early on, and also even if they can't repair it, they will attack and destroy that damaged cell to prevent it from replicate. So bats don't seem to get cancer very often. As a matter of fact, I don't know of a single case. And it just happened that this great ability to detect to prevent DNA damage helps them to not get cancer. Is associated to their extreme lifespan for an animal of this size. Some bats are known to live more than 30 years, and I think the record is around 40 years, which for an animal that only weighs a few grams, it's an extremely long lifespan. So we are just starting to understand bats' metabolic activities and immune systems and biochemistry, but maybe bat streak will have a lot of things to teach us about how can we develop better anti-cancer or antiviral drugs and other treatments. But for sure, yeah, bats are more likely to be our allies in health than otherwise, because of these amazing tricks that they have up their sleeve to fight off damaged DNA and also viral infection. So Mallory is asking, are there any zoonotic diseases that spread one way more than other? Yes, so many zoonotic diseases can actually be spread between animals or from animals to humans by several of the mechanisms that I described. Many can be transferred by saliva, some can actually be transmitted by saliva or by blood or by urine, but also can be airborne. So yeah, in general, exposure of any kind to a wild animal, if you don't take the right precautions, can potentially lead to a pathogen being transferred. But as I was mentioning, not any pathogen that reaches us or domestic animals, for example, from our wildlife, might actually cause disease unless the pathogen is somehow like predisposed genetically or evolutionary to be able to circumvent the defenses that it's going to find in this new host that it just jumped to. Okay, so lots of thanks. Okay, Marielle Trivi, do we know how viruses get into bats initially? Oh, this is an amazing question because we don't really understand a lot about viruses in general, and viruses seem to be everywhere. We actually don't know of almost any animal group, or even a plant group for that matter, that is not affected by viruses of one type at least. Viruses are very amazing living things. I personally consider that they are living, but this is also this is debatable. But viruses are probably as old as the first cells, because they are so extremely specialized at infecting cells, and they have a huge variety of tricks to do it. Of course, most of them are specialized and they can only infect different types of cells, but there is probably no single lineage of animals or plants in the planet that has managed to escape viral infection completely. Because viruses, they mutate really fast, they adapt really fast, and even if you mount a perfect defense that they need to like go into hiding or lay dormant or whatever, as soon as you suffer stresses or get weakened by malnourishment or by whatever reason, then the viruses might take advantage of that. So yeah, we don't know, but viruses are generally part of the life of every single animal and plant group that we see. So yeah, we don't know, but we don't know a lot about like how bats first evolved, because in the fossil record, the first bats that we see are already perfectly flying bats as the ones that we know today. So we don't know exactly how they evolved flight and how flight in turn give them these amazing antiviral defenses that they have today. But we just know that today they fight off viruses very efficiently, and that the viruses that they do have adapted to deal with bats and their defenses. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I guess last question from Alex to everyone. How do bats develop a highly tolerant system? Is there some kind of metabolism related with it? Yeah, so basically, because bats produce a lot of energy in their cells, and their mitochondria is producing this energy, produce a lot of like oxidative molecules that can damage the DNA, then bats have needed to develop ways to control that damage to their DNA. But that also happens to be a great defense against the viruses, because viruses also damage and corrupt the DNA of the cells that they infect, so that they can reprogram these cells and turn them into factories to create more viruses and then replicate. Yep.
Okay. Oh, we may have gotten one.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Christian says, asks, right now it's really important to advocate for these animals in particular, both bats and pangolins. So do you think it'd be wise or safe to tell the general public that these animals are not exactly the cause of the COVID-19 pandemics? Yes, they are not. As I said, the viruses that is infecting humans is neither the same virus that was isolated with bats, and it's also not the same virus that was isolated from the pangolins. So that means that bats and pangolins out there are not transmitting this virus to humans. How we got it, we still don't know. Where is it found in the wild, if anywhere? We don't know. We are still mid-pandemic. There's a lot of like very smart people working on this problem. And we unfortunately have more questions than answers. But yeah, no need to hate on the bats, no need to hate on the pangolins. Again, like healthy wildlife in their healthy habitats means healthy people.
Great. Thank you so much, Juan. That was wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you, our speakers. Yeah, wow. We did it. Our first Science Distilled online. Thank you so much, those of you who are still here. I'm just one last plug for us. If you're not already following us, if a friend turned you on to us, please do check us out and just continue to communicate with us. If you have an idea for a talk or a topic that you would be interested in hearing more about, we are open to those suggestions. So with that, stay tuned. The next Science Happy Hour event from St. Louis will be Astronomy on Tap on May 11th. So definitely stay tuned for that. And
definitely please support Urban Chestnut. The GoFundMe was earlier in this presentation. We'll also provide links to that on our Facebook page. So please help support Urban Chestnut. They certainly provide a great venue for us, and help them out and support us and our partners as much as you can.
thank you so
Thank you.
much, you all.